Welcome to the June meeting of Parsec. Parsec is a 501c3 nonprofit organization promoting science fiction, fantasy, and horror in literature, media, and music for over 30 years. Our mission is to promote awareness of the richness of speculative fiction as literature, art, and music, further general education in the sciences and arts, support contributions, both scientific and artistic, to society, and to espouse the enjoyment of speculative fiction as literature, art, and music with others. This month, we're again trying to return in-person meetings at the Squirrel Hill branch of the Carnegie Mellon Library. Here's our wonderful group. Thank you all for showing up in person. And our program is our Hugo Award-winning illustrator, Elizabeth Leggett, and her work focuses on soulful human moments in time that combine ambiguous interpretation and curiosity with realism. We'll talk a little bit more about that and introduce Elizabeth in a moment. But first, our news for Parsec for June. Now, as I read these, all of the links mentioned are going to be put into the chat. Jane's going to put them in once we're sure, like, everybody's here for the day, and you'll be able to find the links in the chat. So, Parsec meetings are always free to attend and open to the public. Support us by becoming a member. Dues are only $30 a year. Add $10 for each associate voting membership in the same household. You can sign up at the link that will be in the chat. Amazon Smile is a great way to support Parsec. Sign into your Amazon account and choose Parsec as your charity of choice. And every time you shop at Amazon Smile, a portion of your order goes to Parsec. Elizabeth Leggett is a Hugo Award-winning illustrator whose work focuses on the soulful human moments in time that combine ambiguous interpretation and curiosity with realism. Her work can be found in Houghton Mifflin and Harcourt, Dreamforge Magazine, Spectrum, Lightspeed Magazine, Mothership Zeta, Lethe Press, Blessed Publishing, Art Order, Infected by Art, Quill Runner Publishing, Quiet Thunder Productions, Little Springs Design, S.J. Tucker, and a number of private collections. She was the cover artist and art director for Lightspeed special issues, Women Destroy Fantasy and Queers Destroy Science Fiction. Her work, Readings, presents the Major Arcana as a Bradbury-themed series of 22 limited edition 12 by 18 prints collected into a handsome portfolio. And today, Elizabeth will be talking to us and giving us a glimpse into the world of science fiction and fantasy illustration. And we also will give you a link to her website as well. Now, we do have some art pieces from Elizabeth. So first, Elizabeth, why don't you just say hello, and then I'll share screen and we'll talk about some of your art. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and you have made it very clear that I need to update my blurb. Oh, that was painful. As he said, my name's Elizabeth Leggett. I am currently, my bread and butter is doing book covers for, the big one is Bridget's Gate, which is spooky, not quite horror, but close. And I'm about to finish up my 19th cover for them. My second is Prince of Cats Productions. I'm working with Melinda Snodgrass, primarily. Just did one for Jody Lynn Nye, which has cats on it. So my cat got to be a figure in this cover. Let's see, I am about to be guest of honor for SoonerCon this coming up weekend. Trying to think if there's any other news. Not that I can think of at the moment, but we'll get there. But I am making a note that I need to change my blurb. It's out of date. Anyway.
All right. Let's see about sharing a screen here. Okay, so that's Elizabeth. We've just met Elizabeth. The first thing I want to point out, we'll look at some things that Elizabeth has worked with us at Dreamforge Magazine. And one of the ones that we're proudest of is this anthology that we did last year with Uproar Books called Worlds of Light and Darkness, which was actually a cooperative effort between Dreamforge Magazine and Angelique Rico Smith at Space and Time Magazine. And we couldn't think of anyone that we wanted more than Elizabeth. So she was the first person that we called to do our cover. And the book has received very good reviews, including from book lists that said it was like a work of genius. So we'll take it. Elizabeth, tell me about your thoughts when we asked you to do this cover.
I love your art direction. Pretty much it's show us what you want to do, and then we'll do edits after that. By the way, that's a selling point. It's a big selling point. But I loved the combination of, okay, this needs to be both fantasy and horror and but spooky. And it was thrilling to try to figure out how to make all that play. And the wraparound for that, you get to see more of the threads and so forth of the like spider alien thing down at the bottom trapping the poor fellow. I really enjoyed designing the composition and the color lines. And of course, it has some of my very favorite writers in it. Jane Linsgold is and so it was an honor. It really was. And I'm very proud of it. It goes in almost all of my panels when I go, and I did this thing. Which is neat. Does that help? Do you have questions?
I just wanted to add, you did mention the idea of art direction and how you like working with us. And I do remember about this one, I think it was about the bird flying away, but I remember we had a bit of direction. It's like, shouldn't it be bigger or shouldn't it be more angled like this or something like that? And you very forthrightly came back and said, no. It's like, no, it works this way because, and you made very, very clear sense. And Jane has been an art director as well. And we basically looked at your comments and said, yeah, Elizabeth's right. So how does that work in your work in general? Do you often get direction from crazy customers that it's just do this crazy thing?
Well, most of my work currently is with Heather Ventura for Bridget's Gate. And pretty much she leaves me to my own devices unless she's currently gotten some British writers, and they had already designed covers but had to do redesigns. And sometimes I have to talk them through. I have to talk them through, okay, this is the visual line that we're trying to achieve. And I was recently in a panel with Donato Giannicola, which, by the way, that was heady because he's been a hero of mine for 20 plus years. And we were talking about, how do you guide an eye? How do you lead a person through an illustration to the points that you actually want them to pay attention to? And this particular piece, the artwork is actually tertiary to everything else. The primary is actually the title. And so what you want is to take the color and lead the eye up to what you want them to pay the most attention to, which is the title. And then the reason that there's a sizable space over on the left side for the short stories and that sort of information is that's a secondary. You need, because the people that are writing are much more important than the artwork is. Because this is an anthology. This is, people that are buying this for the short stories. I mean, I'm not saying that that's not primarily what happens with a cover, but primarily the purpose of a novel cover is that 6 seconds. 6 seconds it takes them to walk in the door, see the cover, and pick it up. That's not the same for something like this. The purpose for this is that 6 seconds is for the title. So, and normally you guide with color. And so hitting everything so that it's angled toward the opening of the book is an important aspect of composition. for this sort of thing. And so that's why that swoop is important. Anyway.
On the way that you use the orange gold colors at the bottom are very muted. Towards the front of the spider, it's a little bit more, but the bird really jumps out. And that is what you're doing with the color to take them right up to that.
Do you have time for a question?
Of course.
I'm interested by the way you've angled the gateway, window, doorway, whatever that is, so that everything is kind of on a tilt, and I like it. I'm not sure that would have occurred to me, and I'm wondering if there was. I probably would have oriented the gate vertically, just automatically, and what was the thought process in not doing that?
This is supposed to be in space.
Okay,
so
there's no up and down.
Well, no, the mind registers straight up and down or straight horizontal as gravity. There's gravity. And so if you have it at an angle, it implies other things. It implies, you can use it also for characters for drama, but that will give a leaning toward there is a dynamic movement. And so if you want to give the tactile impression of things are not situated on Earth gravity, you shift.
Thank you. That makes perfect sense.
Sure. Larry. Elizabeth, hi, I just wanted to ask you, what medium is this? Is it oils, acrylics?
I was waiting for that. All right. I am a digitalist. I have been a digitalist for now, as of this year, 30 years. I started in '92. I was working on my master's degree in education, and I was an oil painter at that time. But I was going into education, and this is what I was going to do, and so forth. And Adobe and Wacom were looking for beta testers, and they came to the university, and a friend of mine who was working as a classic painter came in and said, hey, you want to do this thing? And they came to, there was one art class for educators. They called it Art for Educators. And I was in the thing, and they wanted to see if essentially classic painters could break the software. And so they gave us basically they gave us a tablet. It was 22 by 24. They gave us the software and said, pretty much, see if you can break it. And that's how it started. I love to travel. And especially at that time, I really loved to travel. And schlepping around canvases was a pain in the tuchus. And this made it so that there was a mobility. Most of these have between 300 and 600 layers. I treat digitalism as I would an oil painting. The advantages, in fact, I have to do a panel on this. I'm currently writing a panel on this. The pros to working digitally, primarily for me, it doesn't cost an arm and a leg, and it's portable. And edits do not make me cry. And so I can put on my business card, I make deadline, and I do edits without drama. The disadvantages, it's very sterile, and there's a stigma against it. I'm hoping that sooner or later that will change, but as of right now, people are still learning. So in fact, in my panel, I found a screenshot of Pong. And I said, and this is where this was what was very big when I started computer graphics. So, so does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's beautiful work. I would have never guessed it. Well, there's that stigma again, I guess. I just assumed it was oil or acrylics.
Thank you.
Well, do you work strictly Adobe Flash Photoshop, or do you use some of the other kinds of tools as well?
Oh, I love to play with Illustrator, but most of the time I don't have time to play with Illustrator. What's really sad about the piece that you just brought up is that the eyeball, normally I do work at 800 DPI. And so what you can't see in that is that if you get really, 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 really close, there's thread marks. But you can't see it, which is sad. I like to hide Easter eggs in pieces. So the screensaver is actually a cover for Lisa Inman. She was like, "Hey, I get to do it, yay!" So I get to be in your cover. So I like to hide things, and you're going to come to another one further down the line where I hid one of my other paintings into the painting. So.
Oh, cool. Let me explain this one just briefly. So this one is actually by us for a story by Kim Zazayas, who's associated with Parsec, and it's a story called "And Mr. Gibson Goes to Work." And so where the first one we saw with Worlds of Light and Darkness, I would call that more like a branding challenge. You're trying to get people to pick up the book and that kind of thing. This was actually more of an illustration of we have to kind of bring the story to life a little bit and make the story intriguing. Now the challenges you had were, one, it's set in Pittsburgh. The story basically contrasts someone who is really sort of a businessman, very down to earth, calm, with basically the world becoming an amazing surrealistic fantasy around him. So it's a very intriguing story, but then you had the challenge of how do you bring all those elements together? Pittsburgh, surrealism, a sort of conservative business, and why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Okay, so because the character tries to keep his world straight and narrow inside his workplace, there was the beiges and so forth were he's pretty straight and narrow. He's got his whole concept is finding balance in this crazy, lovely, by the way, lovely story. You should read it. Do the thing. But all of this madness is every time that he steps out of his office, there are all of these wonderful, crazy things, and he handles them with this patient grace. And so part and parcel of essentially making this almost a walkthrough for a house sort of look was to take all the color and force you to look toward it. And when we were talking about the verticals, he's down to earth, and part of that is making him so vertical, so straight, so staid. But to have, you don't really see him at first. The first thing you see, in my opinion, is the eyeball. But the window directs you to the title. It brings you look up, and that's how you see the dragon in the background. That's how you see the city, is because you're driven upward. Any other questions?
Just say I really like that everything inside of the room is very linear, I
Yeah.
suppose, gridded out, where there's only straight lines, and then beyond the window everything is just, there's curves everywhere, you can see strange shapes and everything. And even with the character being the straight and narrow, there's still something a slight bit off with his posture.
It worked. It worked. I don't normally get to have this moment where people get to chat about a cover that I've done and give me feedback. I don't normally get that. So yay.
I'm also a digital artist myself. I've been drawing for about 15 years. Nowhere near the same skill level, but I've come to learn and notice a lot of these things in other people's art.
Let's move on to probably one of my favorite, I'll say it's my favorite, largely because of the experience we had here. Now, when you're making a magazine, one of the things that happens is everything has its deadline, right? And there's a point where if you're going to get this going, you have to have your cover art decided on, you have to figure out what's going on with the cover art. Well, this particular issue came out in July 2020, so we're right in the middle of COVID, right? So nothing at all is working right. I don't have my reading period set up yet, so I'm not going through submissions, but I need to figure out what the cover is, and we need to get a cover locked in there, and then I need a story kind of for the cover. So we kind of just did a desperation thing where we turned to Elizabeth and said, well, we've wanted to get you on the cover. This was the first time I think she was on our cover. And we said, we want to get you on the cover, just do something. And we were talking about different ideas, and one of those ideas was Pandora's box. So for Elizabeth, it just became, go do something that conveys an idea of Pandora's box. And actually, then I took it upon myself as I will write the story that goes with whatever it is you draw. I have no idea what the illustration is going to be, but you do an illustration and I will write a story for it. So Elizabeth put this together, which was absolutely brilliant. And I'm going to have her describe it a little bit, but one of the things was basically her take on it and then me working off her take to write the story. But Elizabeth, why don't you just talk about this piece a little bit?
All right, so an important factor in this, I live in New Mexico. And so plant life is not something we have a whole bunch of. And I am fascinated with succulents. And because this was in the middle of the pandemic and so forth, it was easy for me to see hope as water in a desert. And so that's part and parcel of the reason there is, first of all, an egg of water. And it's set on a succulent, which, by the way, again, that's another one of those things. I wish you could get right in there and see some of the detail work. But I was, yay! Thank you. Yeah, see? All right, so the second part of this is I was raised in essentially hurricane country, and we're going to talk about that for another piece too. And driftwood and I have a love. The organic shapes of it, I just dig. And so pretty much this whole piece is holding on to the preciousness of hope. So that's the reason there's an acorn, and that's the reason that there is almost a topiary around inside of the water molecule. I wanted her to be all of this color behind it. She's holding on to hope. And I love her face. One of the things that I try to do is to learn how to do different ethnic skin tones, because I get to play with all kinds of things. This one had part of the reason that there's all of that green behind is the underpainting is in green, which again, we're talking about plants and trying to rebuild things and so forth and so on. But orange plays really nicely on top of green. It takes on a luminous quality. It takes on a fullness. And because this was a really hard piece for me, I'm going to hypothesize that everybody was having trouble in July 2020. And so I wanted a piece. I wanted her to be a centering figure. Almost, I wanted to go almost Buddhist, but mostly I wanted her to have a calmness, to have a centering. So the first thing you're going to see is her face because of the color contrast. And then you drop to the color of her shawl, and then you really start to process the acorn trapped container. I did break my big rule, which is to take you up to the title. But if you get to that point, her hair will bring you up to the title. There were a lot of composition rules that I broke with this piece, but it's very dear to my heart.
Yeah, it's very dear to mine too. And so my challenge became actually writing a story based on this. And the name of the story is Pangenesis. It's free online. You can read it. It made it on Tangent's 2020 recommended reading list. But every aspect that Elizabeth brought to this image is in the story. So I made that my mission. And it's a science fiction story. So I did things like the things you see, like the driftwood and the acorn and even the egg or globe of water and the flower it's sitting on, her kimono. Everything is in the story. And I made the story basically be about the last human, our woman there, and at the end of time, at the actual end of the universe. And she belongs to a civilization that is so powerful, just like we use computer icons, where we'll see something on the screen and we'll click on an icon that has a certain shape or has a certain look to it, like the little bird for Twitter. The objects around her basically are essentially like power icons. So they look like art pieces or artful pieces or like driftwood, but they're actually world-changing technologies that command enormous power. So if you read the story, you'll see everything in that picture I've managed to work into the story.
Can I just ask a question? And I'm sorry, I don't quite recognize what the brown object underneath the acorn is. What is that?
It's actually, I don't know, Elizabeth, you explained that in the story, it's Pandora's box.
Oh.
But Elizabeth, what underneath the acorn, the brown base urn kind of thing? Because I remember you talking about that when we were doing it, and even its shape in terms of relating to the Pandora legend.
Well, there's a dark version of the Pandora. Both of them are dark, but there's one that's really, really dark, where hope doesn't escape, but it's an evil force. In this, I wanted the hope to be in a living thing. So it's in wood, which is very precious, as you just noticed with all the driftwood. And it's been what I wanted was it to have space and elegance in everything. Most of this piece is vertical. And as we just spoke, the things that are tilted are not in the same gravitational force as the others. So this is just holding hope. The latch is not locked. The acorn is, for the future, it's a symbol of future growth. And so I wanted to give it sort of an Asian feel because she has an Asian feel, but it's just the container of hope, which I always resented it being in a box. I can see evil things in a box. I'm not really fond of angles, as you may notice in most of my work. But things that, in my opinion, that are precious have organic vibe. So I don't know if that made any sense.
I can see it now. Thank you.
No problem.
I have a question too. If I were doing something, I would avoid doing highly detailed cloth with incredibly detailed patterns. And that's something you seem to tend toward, and we'll see that in some of the other pieces too. Are you crazy? would be number one. And then how do you go about like doing that pattern with the wrinkles and the shape of the clothing and things like that?
Again, it's an underpainting sort of thing. And so you lay the opposite color. And actually this one is not actually black. It's green and brown, but it reads as black, which I love. I think that's cool. And most of the stitch work is a lovely time for me to think of other parts of either this or the composition that I'm working on, or a composition that is coming up. So it's very meditative for me, and it gives a richness that I'm pretty excited about. And my grandmother she collected colonial Williamsburg antiques, and she had Tonkas all over the place as sort of a counterbalance. And so there would be these deep, rich, amazing blues, and then she'd have stitch work. And for me, there is an elegance in that sort of look that you can't find anywhere else. And I also, yes, there's a very good chance that I'm mad.
Yeah. It's incredible. Your textures in general, like when you look at the texture on that wood, the texture on the lotus flower, all of them have like an incredible detail to them. But the idea of the patterns that you do is just, they're amazing.
I did semi-recently, like this year, last year, I did just a study to see if I could do embroidery work on satin. And by the way, I'm never doing that again.
So you're not that crazy then.
The stitch work wasn't the problem, the satin was. And that's part of the reason that you're going to see in a future piece, I made the glove satin, because that's a skill set I don't want to lose, but I don't want to complicate with having to balance with thread work. And so the one you're going to see coming up is just flat. Well, kind of flat. I mean, it has the shape, but it doesn't have any texture on it.
Do you track your time of how long you spend on each piece?
No.
No. You probably don't want to know.
My husband is pretty good about, he will occasionally go, Beth, you should probably have a shower. Beth, you should probably eat. I can lose time. I can start in the morning and look up and it's dark. And that is standard operating procedure for me. So, yeah, I don't track time.
You don't track time, not just the time you work. You don't track time, period.
I don't track time at all.
Yeah, one more question from here about this piece.
And if I may mention, you mentioned that this is, during the most draining part of our whole COVID pandemic as of yet back in 2020. We've been a year into it. The picture itself feels very like it's closing in. It's very like, not claustrophobic, but it's getting closed in, and yet there's still hope. You can still see a brightness at the end of it.
Yeah, there was a little bit of, all of your socializing was on Zoom. And I think that may have influenced part of the composition. But yeah, that yes. And July is I'm born in July. And so when I found out that this piece was coming out, it helped. It really helped. So.
Okay, let's look at the next one. Now this one I chose because it's not a character, but it's essentially a mood piece of the story. Involves a small, quiet, bookshop in London, I believe. And, so you had to kind of bring that to life. So let us know how you feel about this kind of, not quite architecture, but it's certainly not character either.
Can you expand into the stained glass part? Yeah, that's how all that started. I read the story and I knew that I didn't want to give the story away because the story is freaking awesome. But I wanted to play with reflections in stained glass. And so can you pull back just a little? Right. If you look, there's the reflection of a tree in shadow. And I didn't want the very first thing for you to see is the kitty cat in the glass. I wanted that to be a surprise because it's a surprise in the story. So, and I don't normally get to play with dusty glass. And so, yes, this was a pain in the tuchus, but it was a delightful pain in the tuchus. I'm very proud of this piece. I'm honored to have been able to do this, to have been part of Miller's brilliant writing. And he's gone now, and so being able to have some tiny thread of connection with him, yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. So
Yeah, I love the mood of this one. It just fit the story so well. And the muted colors, it's a little different from a lot of the other ones that you do. And I really loved it.
I have a question, if you don't mind. When you're doing a book cover illustration, do you read the book? Do you read part of the book?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's really basically it.
If I am really, really lucky, I get very excited when they send me the book. But for the most part, they'll give me a blurb or they'll give me a direction. And it's, I'm going to have to tangent on you a little bit. I've been really fortunate with Dreamforge because the art notes are solid. But I have gotten my worst story of art direction. A art director said, I want a rainbow thunderstorm. Now, I love doing clouds. Oh my God, give me skies and I'm a happy, happy camper. And so I'm like all excited about doing this. And I'm like, oh, we're going to, and all of this movement, all of this color, all of this. And I turn it in. And the art director goes, I meant a dragon. And I'm like, right? I said, that is a concrete noun. Let's work with concrete nouns. So one of the things that I love about working with Dreamforge is there's lots of concrete nouns, very excited about those. And they give me beautiful stories and I can read them. And that is a luxury in, at least at my end of the food chain in what I do. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that was absolutely. Thank you.
Any more questions? All right, we're gonna then take a look. You had mentioned working with Jane Lindskog, and we also work closely with Jane, and we've known her ever since we were developing computer games. And she has a series, a Firekeeper series, which are 5 or 6 very big books, and they involve our giant wolf, blind seer, and the young girl Firekeeper, who's been raised by the wolf pack. And this was a story that essentially was implied in like her novels, like it's a side piece, but she never got to write it. It would have just distracted if it were actually included in the novel. So we were lucky enough to publish that. And for my money, we have every one of her books in hardcover with their illustrations. But in my mind, you provided the best illustration of the characters that I've seen any of the artists that worked on her stuff do.
I have this piece in particular is about 5 different paintings. That because she has such a clear idea of what she wants for Firekeeper, and it's difficult sometimes because I can't see in her head. But I also have an amazing model. Her name is Dr. Kathy Plesko, and she is the model for just about everything that I do. And you'll see later. Actually, I don't think you have one of those, but I make her a redhead pretty regularly, and she's like, I don't want to be a redhead anymore. But she is very animated, and she understands positioning. And so she sat. Actually, I can show you. Hold on a second. Please excuse the jerking around, but that chair over there, I have one downstairs as well, and she perched in the chair, and I was like, that is the pose for me. And I told her to think about a boss that was bugging her, and that's the face I got. So a second point about this, I don't really, and I'm about to violate all kinds of rules, but I'm not crazy about wolves. And so part of this ended up being going through multiple versions of wolves and sending them to Jane and having her Jane go, nope, 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 nope. And so this was really hard. And so it got to the point that the deadline was getting close and I needed some texture. And so I had done all of these wood pieces. And so I apologize if it has it is not as clean as I would like, but I'm still pretty proud of it. The stuff that was the hard stuff worked. So
I just wanted to add from our experience, like, and you can tell me about your experience in this, Elizabeth, but the idea of working with authors and illustrating things that they do, for the most part, like when we make a magazine, and from what I understand, most magazines, most book covers, the author does not really get a say in the illustration. And our experience in working with Dreamforge is a very simple reason with this. It's not because anybody wants to be mean to the author, it's because basically nothing would ever get done. You would just basically go through endless rounds of revisions, and the time doesn't exist. And the illustrator, like Elizabeth, would actually like to be paid, and she'd like to be paid more than $3.25 an hour. So, you know, there's a budget that this is going to have to come in at, and you can't have the artist do many revisions to try to get that illustration perfectly set. So for the most part, authors don't get a lot of say in what a particular illustration or what a book cover looks like. And the second reason is that oftentimes, as Elizabeth was telling us when she was describing doing the cover for Worlds of Light and Darkness, the illustrator's working on a branding statement. The illustrator's job isn't to illustrate the story so much and bring that character to life in exactly the way the author sees it. The illustrator's job is to get somebody to pick the book up and buy it. That's their job. And oftentimes that's at odds with what's in the head of the author. But, you know, ultimately the publisher and the illustrator are really trying to look out for the author, because the best thing for the author is if somebody buys the book. So Elizabeth, why don't you just talk to that stuff I just said? Okay,
so, and I wish one of these days I'm going to take a diplomacy class, because there needs to be a skill set in keeping authors out of their own way. They have very clear ideas about how they perceive the characters, how they perceive the action, what they consider the important parts of the story. The problem
Have you ever babysat a 6-year-old?
Yes.
That's your lesson. That's what you work with.
I'm taking that. but the problem is that you don't want to give things away. You don't want to, and there's a hierarchy, again, with primary, secondary, and tertiary. If the author is completely unknown, you want the artwork on the cover to sing, because they won't be, the people that are coming in the door of the bookstore or looking on Amazon, they're not looking for the author. And they're not looking for the title. So you have to grab them with color. You have to grab them with visuals. If we were doing a George R.R. Martin, all they would have to do is have George R.R. Martin on there, and it could be a completely black cover, and people would still buy it. If it is a series that's being, that's the first one got some heat, the second book, you want to lead with the title. And a lot of people don't realize that that's part of what's going on in a cover artist's mind, is what do I want these people to focus on after my job is done? And ultimately, you just wanted to get out the door. So my job, as I've said, is about 6 seconds. Their job is to carry it afterwards. So.
And we're a little lucky with the magazine stuff in that we have a little more luxury to just illustrate the story. We're not trying to sell from the illustration from the story. And that's where I know in Jane's mind, this is closer to what her character is than anything, because she's actually, because we could do that. We had the luxury to do that. In all of the book covers, you'd see this young girl in this flowing gown of bright color, and it's like, that is definitely not the character. But we had that luxury. But you made a point there that is something I struggle with all the time, because I read the story and the very incredible visual moments in the story that's like, this would be great, give away the end of the story. So you can't do that as you're coming up with the illustration. And I know that disappoints a lot of authors, that you're not showing the climax, you're not showing, but I never want to give away the story in the illustration that's at the beginning of the story. And it is definitely a struggle to kind of work with that.
She had wanted me to have these two characters looking into the hole that they were about to head into. And I'm like, don't give it. Okay.
We're gonna move into the pieces that I don't know anything about now, so.
Actually, it's right there. I do, because I do a lot of work for publishers. If I do not do pieces for me, then eventually what I give them isn't any good. And so I have them listed as two different things. I have rent work, which has money attached to it, and I have heart work that I hope will go in the gallery, but mostly it's, I want to see if I can play. I need to work through things, and if we're going to discuss, Beth has a thing for stitching on fabric. This piece will show that off. It had started out, I wanted to play around with embroidery work on velvet. And when I got it done, I wanted it to go somewhere. I do a whole series of bird pieces. In fact, I have my gallery owner likes to collect all of my bird pieces. But apparently I hadn't done a magpie, and people wanted to see what I could do, and I got to play with lace. This piece actually, there's a quote from Billy Joel. He says, they asked him once in an interview, they said, what's your favorite of your songs? And he said, I love all of them, but some of them become homeless and some of them grow up to be doctors. This one grew up to be a doctor. She just won gold in Infected by Art for digitalism, and she won 3rd overall. There were over 30,000 pieces in the collection that they were voting against. And they are going to publish 300 of those. So Magpie Charmer, she grew up to be a doctor. I love the idea of, I had read an article about a girl who had befriended a crow, and the crow started bringing her stuff. And it reminded me of, I have a kid. My kid would bring me bits and pieces of toys and so forth and so on, and I had them in a box. And so that's part and parcel of this piece, was collecting all of these wooden toys and weird stuff. And I love the juxtaposition of all of that chaos and the peacefulness on her face. And so, do you have questions? Questions? And I hear chirps. Excellent. Okay.
That's just incredible detail, because go back, Scott.
Oh, sorry.
Like just looking at the elbow there, where a little bit of fray. What made you decide to do something like that?
I don't like clean lines particularly. And I didn't think that someone that would have essentially toys around their neck would have perfect clothing. And so there's even her collar is shredded up at the top.
Oh yeah.
Yep. And there's that ribbon braiding for all the toys. Yeah, I needed it to be rough around the edges. So
just incredible detail. I would like to come and sit behind you for about 30 or 40 hours and watch you work on this, because I'd love to see how you layer things and how you go about the process. Because
oh, now see, the only thing that you would not enjoy is when there's a dot and I can't find it in the layers, and we refer back to the 300 to 600 layers. There is some cursing. There is some very creative cursing.
there is a tool that lets you do that. So you can click the tool to find it, and that usually helps you find your layers. And I don't usually have 600. I don't usually top out maybe around 200. But you know, like I can usually find my layer. I name things and I organize them, but yeah. Yours are 6 layers called Untitled One, right? Copy Untitled One. Yeah, I get it.
We have
What
a couple
medium?
questions. We have a couple questions from the audience here.
You talk about trying to find the one thing you're looking for in 300 layers. It makes me cry when I'm trying to find the one thing I'm looking for in 15 layers.
Yeah, the cats have learned the sound that I make when that happens, and they're gone. It's like there is nothing we need here. But
see, by organizing your layers into folders, you can turn off specific folders of layers, and it helps you narrow down when that mark is where you don't want it to be.
when I grow up, I will be that organized.
What is the name of that piece?
Magpie Charmer.
I'm sorry.
Magpie Charmer.
Magpie Charmer.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
I was going to ask, what different media do you use? You're talking like you use digital, but is it oils and digital? It's all digital?
Yep.
Holy
Like-
smokes.
I love earlier. I was an oil painter. My mom was a single parent. My mom said, "Thou shalt not major in art." And I listened, and I majored in English and psychology, and then I got a master's degree in education. That did not stop the painting on freaking everything. but I didn't want it as a career. And I don't think I would have followed that whole line if they hadn't come to the education department. Wacom and Adobe hadn't come to the education department. And two, if before my mom passed away, she was like, I am sorry that I told you thou shalt not do that. So why don't you pursue that and see what happens? And so that's where we are now. Too much information? Okay.
No,
Yeah.
it's breathtaking. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's I don't know how else to describe it. It's just amazing to me to think that it is digital and to see this kind of stuff.
Well, I'm old school. As I was saying earlier, I've got a panel on traditional versus digital coming up next week at SoonerCon, and I don't see that it needs to be a versus. I think it should be an and, because there's a lot of the same dedication to the process, the dedication to the visualization and the techniques and so forth and so on. And I never wanted to lose what I was doing before just because I picked a medium that was cleaner and easier to carry around. And also at this point, a lot of people are shifting to digital because of housing rates and because you don't have the space, which is sad, very, very sad. But a lot of people are shifting simply because they can carry around what they need without having to dedicate a room to the supplies. So
Your hands are always clean.
right. Well, there's that too. And for me, I now have a very low tolerance to the smells. But
Yeah, I as long as I've known you, I did not know that you were Wacom and Photoshop beta testing, because that would have been like, were you talking like Photoshop 1 even that early? Wow.
it was grim.
Oh
But
yeah, it was not the tool that, like, I only started around Photoshop 4, and it was not the tool then that it is now.
yeah, I mean, I understand why they came to the university. And I understand, they wanted to see if they could be used in classrooms, which is wise. That's a good call. But they also wanted to see all the problems, and they didn't want people that were more familiar with computer work to play with them. They wanted people that's not how they thought. And so I was never formally trained in art, but boy howdy, I did my 10,000 hours before I was in double digits. So in fact, I used to draw on the walls, and I never thought we would move, so that never occurred to me. So I would hide things. I would put my toys in front of things and so forth. And then when we moved, my mom was, she was hot. There was a lot of painting, not the fun kind.
Looking at the background and the training that you've done, if you had majored in art, you might never have gotten as involved in the digital aspect of it as you are today.
I think that it is magic. I think that it is fabulous. It makes it so that I can get all up in, I can, and I'm very comfortably in my mid-50s. So being able to get like right up into the digital, into the pixels, makes me so happy, so happy. And I would have to have wall-size canvases at this point. So yeah. Anyway, this piece is called Rococo. I do what I dub as a muse piece once a year. It changes every year. It looks different every year. A little bit of sadness. I have long COVID, And so, but my brain is very, there's lots of things going on. So what I wanted to show for this piece was the outside might be fragile, but the inside isn't. And so that's why all of this is in porcelain, which, by the way, if you can get up in there, I can, yeah. I'd never painted porcelain before, so that's what I wanted to show. And I love detail work, minor understatement. So yeah, it just, I don't know where that came from. But suddenly I wanted a flying tiger, and so therefore I had to figure out how to make a flying tiger.
Wow.
So he's flying around in his own little.
Oh, and then when you really zoom in and you see the like the rainbow of colors you've got on the moon shape there. Wow.
The tiger looks sad.
Well, yeah. Again, let's refer back to, we were still under lockdown. So
And then do you go find pieces of porcelain to study to try to get the reflections that you need and the lighting? Oh no, something froze.
Oh, might have lost Elizabeth.
I was afraid it was me that froze. I think she froze.
If I can,
I'll watch for her to come back.
did she just drop? I think she just
Yeah,
dropped.
she's gone. Coming back here.
Hi, I'm here.
We
Oh, no.
probably lost you there.
Oh, hi.
Welcome back. I was asking about the like how you study porcelain in order to get the effect that you need. Like, do you just go online and look for porcelain objects and look for things to get? Like, how do you go about saying I got the feel of this right?
My mom had beautiful dishes, and they're way out of my price range, but I inherited them. So I did a whole series that no one will ever see of just painting my mom's, the pattern she had at Nortaki. And so, and she had also had a Danish, just a plain white sugar bowl. I did a once upon a time in a lifetime far, far away. I did a teaching lesson on how to paint white to very well-educated high schoolers. And I brought in the biggest tube of titanium white I could find. And I brought a blue bowl. And I said, okay, so how do you paint white? And they all pointed to the tube. And I said, I got you, I win. Ha! So I took the titanium and I put it in the blue bowl. Bloop. And then I walked it around, and you'll see the reflections of the blue, and you'll see the reflections of the light around, and so forth and so on. And then suddenly white is not white. White is all the colors that surround it. And I said, that's how you paint white. And suddenly it was like, oh, I was like, I'm in. So that's part of this. So any more questions? Yay! This one is another one that grew up and became a doctor. This one is currently showing at the Muslim Museum Leah Gallery in Ohio. And it is the second time that I've been in a museum and I'm not dead. The theme, and those are my mom's dishes. Ah, look at that. The theme for, I got this email from Daniel, and he goes, okay, so we had you in Enchanted Brushes 2 years ago. We're doing a new show. It's going to be water themed. And I'm like, Dan, I don't have anything for you. And he says, oh, don't worry about it. I trust you. Now, I did not realize how rare that is until I was talking to a friend of mine who is also a curator and went, eyes got book. Agreed to have you in the show without seeing it first. And so I figured that they would be up to their armpits in mermaids. And I grew up in hurricane country. My mom would have hurricane parties. She would invite bunches of ladies over and they would play bridge and they all had cocktails. But they were all also prepared with basically bug out bags upstairs. And I wanted to show both the inevitability of what happens during, I mean, I lived on the coast of North Carolina. So we got plowed pretty regularly. And I wanted it to have both a feeling of, well, this kind of sucks, and also waiting for the light to show to come back. But there's an Easter egg in this one too. The painting that's behind her shoulder in the blue is my tower card from my reading, from the readings collection that I did of Ray Bradbury. And so it was based on the foghorn. And it's funny, the people that went to that show, they were like, ah, that's the tower. I'm like, yes, I win. So yes, see, mom's dishes. The sideboard is mine. The alligator, the only thing that you're meeting, that is meeting you breaking the fourth wall is the alligator. I didn't want her to be, I wanted her looking toward the storm. Also, the model for that is my very dear friend Maris, who built her house in the 9th Ward, lost it in 2005 and rebuilt. So I thought that she was perfect for the model. And I have pictures of her. I told her I needed her in hip waders. And she was like, pardon me, what? So I need you in hip waders. The party clothes and when I mentioned that painting satin is a pain in the tuchus, I didn't want to do embroidery work on the satin, but I wanted to make sure that I kept that skill set. So, do you have any questions?
I love the chaos in this. Everything's cattywampus and she's just standing there.
Yep. The title of this piece is Cocktails in September. The playing cards at the bottom, because my mom would play bridge with the ladies. It was part of what I wanted to do was to see if I could do, there's a off balance of things in water from underneath when you're seeing it, and I wanted to see if I could handle that. That was a skill set I wasn't sure about. I'm pretty excited about the curtain. Curtain was a pain in the tuchus. And the underwater was a pain in the tuchus. But and the blues send you. So questions?
What kind of bird is that?
Pardon?
I heard it.
Where? The bird?
Yes.
Oh, blue heron. I'm not sure if I captured that. But I love doing feathers and details and so forth and so on. And again, my gallery owner loves the bird pieces. Apparently he has some buyers that's their thing. They want all the birds. Keeping the gallery owner happy is big. So.
What
Any
did
other-
you say the theme was?
Oh, the theme is Mysterious Fathoms. They just opened. They even have a little video of it. It's the Mazda Museum Findlay Gallery. Yeah, they have some beautiful, beautiful pieces. They've got a scratchboard from Ruth Sanderson. They've got sculpture from Kristen and Colin Poole. They have, I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful show. I'm very, very honored to have been invited to play. So.
I like the fact that there are no verticals in the there are implied verticals. I mean, the window, the painting, whatever, usually would be square and upright, but everything is tilted just a little bit, and the reflection of of everything down, leading from upper right to lower left, and it's just a lot of fun. And here she is, the island of calm in the middle of it, like the eye of a hurricane. And I noticed that a lot of your pieces tend to be like that. There's a lot of chaos, but a central image of calmness and collectedness.
I win. I win. Thank you. Okay, so this is one of those pieces that I had never ever expected to actually happen. Phil Foglio wrote a novel. Phil Foglio did not want to do the cover. And I'm still trying to process the fact that he's like, no, I don't want to do the cover. I'm like, you're Phil Foglio, come on. So I get the art notes for this piece and chaos, 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 chaos. Okay, right? Well, I kept adding, and it was kind of like in Labyrinth, Jim Henson realized that nobody was seeing any of the puppets in the remind me of the magic dance scene, because they were all looking at David Bowie. And I kept adding and adding and adding and adding and adding. And Phil was like, it's not crazy enough. It's not crazy enough. It's not weird enough. I'm like, okay, all right. So most of the weird critters, the eyeball up in the sky, and the kind of octopus thing, and the demon on the side, and the blue space dude, and the guy with the TV on his face. All of those were designed for a remedial reading teacher who was looking for icons to teach different things. So the TV guy was Captain Procrastination. The blue guy was Professor Proofread. The demon, I can't remember what the demon was, but all of them were icons that I had done for her to show different aspects for, the octopus was fear, public speaking fear. Well, and the figure with the green, with the headphones and the green hair, that's my kid. The blue dinosaur is actually for a writer who passed away. His name was Victor Milan, and he had a thing for dinos, and he did a series. The Dinosaur Princess, the Dinosaur Lord, so forth and so on. And he was one of the very first people in Santa Fe who kind of looked after me. And so I tried to honor that. The only art notes I got for this piece were for the skeleton cat. Everything else, he pretty much left me to my own devices. So there is a reason that it's random and all over the place, because I really did try to keep it in the original style of everything was organized, but he just kept adding, wanting more and more stuff. So, and that's part of what that is all about. And apparently it's selling well, and they think it's his art, and I'm okay with that.
That's amazing detail. And again, just crazy. Like, how'd you even think of some of these things? You know, like the cowboy with wings and chasing the cow, and then there's a little puppy down there in the corner by that dinosaur, and I saw a cat over there. It's just like crazy stuff. And then even the face in the TV.
Yeah, it's like I said, the TV guy had been designed previously, but the Cowboys, they do a lot of filming right up the road in Santa Fe, and so that's a skill set that I have to have. I have to be able to do writers and so forth and so on. And so I there's a lot of stuff in here that were studies. But he was like, I need this and that and the other thing. And I'm like, okay, yes, sir. And so there's a reason that it's kind of hodgepodge as far as stuff's concerned. But when you go out, it has a nice flow, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it circles right around the character that,
Yep.
you know. And then
So-
the cat just totally stands out.
That's Miss Fezziwig. That's my cat.
Okay.
She gets a lot of cover time. She's very patient. Oh, and there's an Easter egg in this one too. The rocket ship that's on my kid's shirt is actually from a piece called Learner's Permit that I did a couple of years ago. When the kid was learning how to drive, the first wandering into the main highway, they called semis whales. So in the learner's permit piece, there is this little bitty rocket ship with a fish inside that's merging in with these flying whales. And so I thought that it was appropriate that the kid had.
Nice.
Okay, and the last piece we have is this one.
That is Cassandra's Dreams. It was supposed to be for a novel called Foretold. This one those are my hands before I had something that looked like nails, but I've got a convention coming up. And I wanted to not give the story away, but I also wanted, because the title was Foretold, and it was about Cassandra. So most of us know the legend. She is blessed with the power of prophecy, and then because she says no to the god who is wants to be romantically involved, he curses her. He can't take the blessing away, but he can make it so that nobody believes her. So all of the butterflies are truths. I'm also have a fascination with the visual of sign language. And so I wanted it to look like her throat was being choked off without having her throat choked off. And also, hands are a pain in the tuchus, and so practicing them is good. The velvet was hard, especially since butterflies and moths have that dust, and I wanted it to have the fabric and the dusty wings to have a nice blending. they decided to go with something less dynamic. I'm not exactly sure, but I've got a really cool piece. So
That's beautiful.
thank you.
Any questions?
Yes. Keys and eyes. You said the
Uh,
butterflies are truths that Cassandra would provide, but I see the keys and the eyes on the velvet, and
And it's very hard to see, but there's a very faint key on her arm. Wisdom is unlocking of, yeah, there you can see it. Yeah,
Down, down.
down. Yeah, there it is, right there.
My God, it is there. Okay.
In my view, being able to, one of the symbols of telling stories and so forth is unlocking the problems, right? And so if she has the ability to do prophecies, she has the keys, but they're hidden in curtains. She can see, she can perceive. It was very hard. I love doing portraits. And so I wanted to make an implication of you have the answers here, but you still want to keep them covered up. Does that help? I really do give a lot of thought to pieces, probably more than the writers usually or the publishers actually want, but I have stories going on in my head while I'm working. And some of them match the project and some of them don't. One of these days I'm going to write all that down. But that's part of the composition decisions for that one.
This isn't a question, but just to say, I love your artwork and your presentation. I think it's been one of the more enjoyable presentations I've ever seen at Parsec.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree, and I'll throw in that if you ever open up a haberdashery, I'll buy your shirt designs.
Oh, thank you. Am I leaving? Are we at the leaving stage? We're leaving at the leaving stage.
We'll see you.
Yeah, you're welcome to leave here. We just have a little bit of like last minute stuff to cover, but yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Talk to you soon. Okay, attending member stuff. Mary Swin Lee, can you read a poem for us this month?
Sure, I'm always up for that, Scott. Okay, shall I do so now?
Yeah, you're always
Okay.
going to be, just, in case you haven't figured it out yet, you're always going to be at the top of my attending member announcements list. Is
Okay.
Mary Swin Lee present and does she have a poem?
Okay, here we go then. This poem appeared in Uncanny Magazine. And it's probably important, in case you don't really listen to me saying the title, that it is being narrated by an artificial intelligence for a spaceport. Confessions of a Spaceport AI. For firstly, I have deemed myself superior to my human employers. For secondly, I have issued last-minute departure pad changes for my amusement. For thirdly, I refused entry to the Jovian ambassador because of his ignorance of the periodic table. For fourthly, I programmed the music to match my taste, not my customers. For fifthly, humans have execrable taste. For sixthly, I ordered ship inspections merely so I might chat with their AIs. For seventhly, I was lonely. For eighthly, I discriminated in favor of cyborgs. For ninthly, on my birthdays, I slowed my spin so that children might play in microgravity. For 10thly, I misplaced the baggage of those who ignored my pronouns. For 11thly, there was no need to quarantine the herd of llamas. For 12thly, I reconfigured half my hydroponics bays as artificial grasslands. For 13thly, I have served for 89 Earth years without respite, and I shall keep the llamas for as long as I wish. And now I can't remember if I said that it appeared in Uncanny Magazine, but I always feel obligated to say where things appeared. So thank you.